Welcome back for another episode of the Blue White Illustrated Recruiting Podcast. Sean and I are back today to discuss a 2023 prospect who just set an official visit to Penn State for January. We'll also take a closer look at 2024, some of the key guys at each position, and who Penn State really wants in next year's class. Let's get started. Merry Christmas, Fitz.
Merry Christmas to you as well. Hope everything went well in the Snyder household and everyone's healthy and everything like that. And I hope all of our listeners and viewers on YouTube are also feeling the same after a wonderful Christmas holiday in which everything went right and, everything was great.
We did the purge last night, man. I think we did like 2-3 garbage bags of stuff. We're donating it, everyone. Don't worry, not throwing it out. But I still have a full car of stuff that we haven't even unloaded yet, on top of all the stuff that everyone spoiled my children with on Christmas Day. So I hope everybody's kids got spoiled. I know my kids did, and I can't wait to clean it all up and trip over it in the months ahead. Okay.
Yeah. We kind of had an illness issue, so the grandparents didn't come until late, and my kids found out how much less they get from their parents than they get from their grandparents, and they were just like, "What the hell are we doing here, Dad? Like, where's all the stuff?" And luckily, we got things squared away. So it's the season of magic for sure.
Well, Penn State has a massive bowl game coming up, back to the Rose Bowl. We'll talk about that a lot in the next couple of days ahead. Of course, this is the recruiting podcast. And I'll be honest, there's not a ton to talk about. We had signing day last week. We did the live show. We did the superlatives to recap that. Been a slow couple days on the recruiting trail, but Sean, you did confirm a big official visit for January. I'll throw it to you, and what do you got to say about Chimney Onwu?
Chimney is a guy that is going to be really, really popular in January. This is a guy that Penn State offered on December 18th. Of course, they're always looking for offensive tackles. Chimney was committed to Old Dominion. Of course, a lot of the staff, Penn State fans know a lot of staff there with Ricky Ronnie. Kevin Reiner was there. You've just got a little overlap. It's not a situation where James is taking somebody from ODU because he decommitted a few weeks ago, visited Rutgers. Rutgers pushed to sign him in the early signing period. He did not. And I think that that's probably a good decision for him because Penn State's waiting for him. Michigan State just offered. Ole Miss is there. He's going to get out and see different schools in January. And this is one of those times when you find a guy, diamond in the rough is a huge cliche here, but this is a guy that has a lot of the skills that you're looking for, especially in a late get. He's been elevated to 4-star status on 3, and I think that there's tools to work with there. He's far from a finished product. That's why he's there. He's in Dundalk, which does not produce a ton of that area does not produce a ton of high D1 kids, but still listed at 6'6". Not sure what the actual measurements are, but he's athletic, plays basketball, 3-sport athlete. Phil Troutline went down to see him at his school, watched him work out playing basketball, and came away pleasantly surprised. So if you look at all the stuff that's still out there or was out there, it's not much after signing day. It's like Christmas. You get picked through, and then you're looking for bargains in the new year. Certainly this would be a very, very big addition for a program that likes to take these guys that are 6'6", 260 or 265 and can move and things like that and try and make them into offensive tackles. And everybody wants offensive tackles. They are hard to find. They are absolutely hard to find. And Chimney seems to be next in line. So I'm curious to see which direction he goes. He's going to get on campus to Penn State in January. And if they can lock him down, which I think they have a real possibility of doing so, that's a big boost because you look back a year and you see Vega Ione was offered in December, and he had the decommitment from Washington, didn't sign in the early signing period, got popular in January, and then ended up going to Penn State. And they're feeling pretty good about where they're at with Vega Ione. This guy probably will take a little bit longer to develop, but at the same time, if you can find an offensive line, find a good offensive lineman or an offensive line project that's worth your time and trying to mold in January, that would be a great boost to this class, which currently ranks 14th nationally, just ahead of Texas A&M, second in the Big Ten. Don't see a ton of movement coming in the rankings here, but in the new year, especially in the Big Ten. But Penn State's going to probably be in that top 15 because there is a gap after Texas A&M. It drops down to a couple of points in our on 3 total. So Chimney is definitely a guy to know, possibly the guy to know. Looking at the entire board, they're still looking at receiver and corner, but there's not a ton out there that they have prior relationships with that they think are above that line where they can, really use them in this class.
Yeah, T. Frank and I actually discussed the team ratings the other day. I could see A&M passing Penn State, but I don't know if they'll drop to 16. So let's just keep an eye on that over the next couple of weeks. As far as Chimney's family, one, I don't think his family knows what they're in for in January. Those 3 weeks. Right now he's aiming to do Penn State official, Ole Miss official, Michigan State official. I could see, I'm not putting those on his profile right now, because there's a very good chance some other schools are going to come calling and make him think. So I do feel confident he's going to come to Penn State. And with Penn State being the closer of the major programs showing interest, that should really work to their benefit. A couple other things here too. I'll be curious to see how NIL impacts this, just because Michigan State, Ole Miss are, as of right now, Penn State's competition. Rutgers is in there too. But just that's something to keep an eye on. Both of those schools are incredibly aggressive with NIL. And then 3, one thing I did not know about Chimney that I learned after talking to him yesterday is that he's a pretty good at discus and shot put as well, just like Javen Williams. Doesn't have quite the numbers Javen does. Javen had a 66.775 in the shot put, as well as a 189 in the discus. Chimney had a 61.425 in the shot put and a 175.6 in the discus. I believe he won shot put for Maryland State Championship last year.
It is really, really good. I mean, those are really good numbers, especially for a guy that's a little bit thinner in the lower half, and he's a basketball player too. So there's the athletic profile that they're looking for, and that, to be honest with you, we look for at on 3. Our guys looked for, when I was at 24/7, shot put and discus, very big, because those movement skills are kind of similar to what you see as an offensive tackle. So that's one thing where we look, and that's one reason Javen Williams is ranked so high as well.
Massive reason why. So let's see where that goes. As you said, Sean, right now, I can't really point to another 2023 guy. It's like, Penn State's going to push for this guy. They're going to push for this guy. We'll see. We'll see how that comes out in the coming weeks. But right now, Chimney's like the only one that I'm really kind of focused on, and I think you are as well. So let's move on to 2024. I did some wish lists over the weekend, getting in that holiday spirit. I don't know. I could have probably made it better than a wish list, but I wasn't putting too much time into it on Christmas Eve. I hope nobody else was working.
It is the time of year for wish lists, and you could have done worse. You could have written about some other guys that used to be in the class, but you didn't. So
that's true.
Yeah, it's definitely the time of year for this.
Okay, so we'll start with quarterback. I think it's pretty simple right now who their top quarterback is. Sean, you and I both agree. Luke Kromenhoek, committed to Florida State. He has emerged as their top guy. Just look at the December visit period. Yurchich went down there to see him twice in 5 days over a 3-week span that they were on the road? I believe it was. They were not going to see they weren't going to see 2024 guys, multiple guys, multiple times is what I'm trying to say there. So just that right there, I think, speaks really highly to where Luke is at. I mean, he's clearly their top guy. They've got him on campus once. He did come for the whiteout game earlier this year. But again, he is committed to Florida State. Let's see how that rolls. I mean, Sean, I know we agree on this one, but is there anybody else, just Jaden Bradford in that mix up there with Luke? I'm still trying to get a better feel for that. I feel like Luke's the clear top guy, though.
I think Mike Yurcich has kind of made his feelings known on this by going to see Luke several times. And Luke came up. I will say this is different than recruiting against Florida State 3 years ago. Florida State seems to be, I don't want to jinx it, seems to be on the rise in that manner, and actually started winning some games this year. So it's going to be a tougher pull. It's kind of like we were saying with Cam Selden and Tennessee. 3 years ago, you recruit against Tennessee, they implode on the field, and then all of a sudden, he comes back around. That could be a similar situation here with Luke Kromenhoek, because Florida State seems to have a little bit more momentum right now. Excuse me. The rest of the quarterback board, very interesting. They just offered Will Hammond last week, a Texas Tech commit. A lot of commitments so far in the 2024 class in terms of quarterbacks, or at least the guys that Penn State has targeted, which is, I don't think it's a coincidence, but those evaluations are ongoing. The other thing in the 2024 class, a lot of short QBs, a lot of guys that are, 6 foot, maybe just under 6 foot. Mike Yursich, I think, prefers a bigger guy, prefers a standard pocket passer if you're going to get into the cliches and like that and stuff like that. But Jaden Bradford at IMG, Michael Van Buren at St. Francis, captaining two of the top high school programs in the country. Those are tough evaluations because they're just surrounded by talent pretty much everywhere. St. Francis's wide receivers, maybe not as good as IMG's, but or definitely not as good as IMG's. But still, you're not sure how much of a curve you have to grade on for these guys. And on top of that, they're not the biggest guys. They don't have the most growth left for them. So I think there's questions about all these short quarterbacks in the class of 2024. Talented kids, but what do they look like 3 or 4 years from now, and how does that fit into what you're trying to do in your offense?
Well, as someone who's 5'8", shout out to all the short quarterbacks out there. I hope you guys crush it.
Yeah, Mike Yursich likes me more than he likes you. I'm sorry about that.
Yeah, that's okay. You can have Yursich. Running back, Quentin Martin. I think is definitely the pick here on this one. Although there's a lot of other guys who are certainly in the mix here. I mean, whether Quentin is a running back long term, that's the big question here. There's no doubt that he would be the number one guy at the running back board. And that's obviously where they're recruiting him at the moment. But whether he is a long-term quarter or running back, I still have some questions about that. But just some other guys here, Sean, who pops out. I mean, to me, the other one would be Duke Watson, just because of how much we've been talking about him, how interested Duke Watson is in Penn State. But man, there's a lot of guys here, from Jordan Marshall to Sam Williams-Dixon. Who am I missing? Jordan Lyle. I mean, there's a couple others. I'll throw it to you. What do you think?
Yeah, Snyder always casts that wide net. And I will say, early, I think Quentin's probably not in this category, but early evaluations of running backs are tough because a lot of those guys that put up different, that put up big numbers as young players in high school don't always develop the way that you want. And there's a couple positions like that. I know corners like that. And, there's a couple across both sides of the ball. But Jordan Lyle has been on campus from South Florida. Snyder is always going to go after South Florida running backs, and Jordan Lyle's a good one. He's been on campus before. Jordan Marshall from Ohio has been on campus or was on campus recently. DeJuan Williams at St. Francis. It's as I said, it's tougher to evaluate some of those St. Francis kids. I think DeJuan Williams is a really good player, and he came up multiple times this year. And of course, don't get your hopes up at St. Francis, etc. But he came up several times this year, not in those big groups that often come up. So I see there's real interest there as well. It's going to be a deep board. It's going to be a talented board. Whether or not there's this board is not going to be the same now in late December as it's going to be next June when they're setting official visits, is what I'm trying to say. A lot of guys out there, a lot of good ones out there, and those evaluations will once again continue.
Yeah, I can still see 2 running backs in this class. Of course, with the portal and everything and how that works out, who knows? It's just so hard to predict numbers now with the portal. But I wouldn't be shocked, especially if Quentin Martin is one of those running backs, if they were to take a second. So we'll see how it goes. All right, wide receiver. Man, 50 wide receiver offers so far. In the whole 2023 class, I think it was a little over 60. I think it was like 63, 64. So make no mistake. This is probably maybe the most important position for Penn State for 2024. They are really trying to, and of course the portal too. I mean, we've hit on that a lot. This is a position they're trying to get a massive influx of talent. Tysier Denmark has already committed to Oregon. Do I think that recruitment's done? Absolutely not. We will be talking about Tysier, I think, at some point down the road. We'll see, actually. Sean, do you think that recruitment's done? You gave me a look like you thought.
No, I don't. Okay. I was just staring into the abyss, looking at these names and wondering where they're going to be in a year.
Yeah. Nick, I mean, look, if there's one guy that Penn State could get over any other, I think it would be Nick Marsh from Michigan. He's committed to Michigan State right now. Let's see how that shakes out. I mean, they're certainly going to keep pushing there. Penn State did host Ryan Wingo. He's going to be a potential 5-star guy out of St. Louis. But the guys I picked for my wish list, Chance Robinson and Keelan Adams. Keelan Adams out of Virginia Beach. Chance Robinson is actually, we talked about Jordan Lyle, St. Thomas Aquinas, another St. Thomas Aquinas guy there. I think Robinson is really moving up their board quickly after that visit during the season. And I think Keelan Adams has been really one of their top 3, 4, 5 guys probably for over a year now. Sean, any thoughts?
No, I think you're good there. In-state is interesting, with Rico Scott and guys like that. Because they are here, they will get certainly more attention. But I think that'll be one to watch. And I agree with you with Chance Robinson, probably a guy that we don't talk as much about. So we'll see what happens with this position. I think there's a lot of evaluation to go. You got to figure out the questions that they've had over the last cycle. You got to figure out if this guy is fast enough to play here. Is this guy good enough to play here? And, you got to figure out what you've got in that class of 2022 as well with Saunders and Evans and Tyler Johnson and Anthony Ivy to figure out what your numbers are going to look like at that position. Because I think that'll play a factor in that. So it's going to be another. I hate to keep saying this, but we're in December. It's the fact of the matter. These evaluations keep going. I don't think there's a single guy outside of Nick Marsh that you look at and say, okay, Penn State's going to go after him with this vigor as an absolute top of the board guy. So I think that there's a lot to go there. Guys that have visited before, Chance Wiggins visited before. I mean, I'm just going through this list, and there's a lot of familiar names, but that doesn't mean these guys are going to be bona fide top targets. Mekhi White, bona fide top targets in the long run.
Yeah, I mean, you can keep going on. You got David Washington out there at St. Joseph's Prep as well. Of course, you mentioned Rico Scott. I mean, there's a lot of guys. One guy I am very intrigued with is Elijah Moore. Remember when he came up to that 7-on-7? I know it was only one day, but man, he made a lot of really nice plays there. Just how does he grow? 6'4", 190. That'll be something to keep an eye on. But I was impressed. I've only seen Elijah once, but I was certainly impressed with him.
Same here. And Day Farmer from Florida just committed to Pitt over the weekend. Penn State liked him a lot. I mean, there's a guy that came up for a visit, and they thought that Penn State thought that they were in it coming out of that. So just a name to fact. I mean, a lot of those early commitments this time of year don't stick, and guys will continue to be recruited at other schools and things like that. So Day Farmer, although he's committed to Pitt, could be an option down the line.
Look, I was preparing for a Christmas commitment. I thought Day was coming here. Fortunately, he shared it with us, so I didn't have to work too hard on that one. But I was a little surprised with Pitt. I mean, he's been to Pitt a couple times, but I kind of thought it was going to be Penn. Look, he wanted to commit to Penn State a while back. Penn State was just kind of, I shouldn't say wanted to, but he had interest. I mean, he made it clear they were his favorite at one point. But I think as things went on, Pitt maybe just kind of pushed a little bit harder there. So
Jeray Hawkins, Josiah Brown, regional guys that have been on campus or camped and things like that. Manny Ross from Red Bank Catholic. We'll see what position he ends up in the long run. But still, there's a lot of quality guys out there, and a lot of guys have been on campus already.
Jeray's had an IMG. Did you see that last week? I think I did. Yeah. That'll be interesting. Okay, tight end. We don't need to spend a lot of time on tight end. Tight end room is loaded, and I think it's really pretty simple. They've had 12 offers out, and there's 3 guys that I think are pretty much ahead of everybody else. We've had Brady Prescorn at the top for a while now, and now I see Carter Nelson out of Nebraska and Jaden Riddell out of Missouri kind of joining him on that list. I'll still put Brady Prescorn at the top of that list. I still feel like as long as he's available, Ty Howell's going to push really hard for him. But Carter Nelson, man, I talked to him this past week, just wrote a story on him today. Man, some of those track and field numbers are incredible. Runs the 200, the 100, did the discus, did the pole vault. He holds the state record in high jump. I mean, there's a lot of verifiable measurements, I guess is the best way to put it, at 6'5", 210. So
yeah, I agree. And we'll see if Elijah Moore, who you just talked about as a receiver, does one of those guys end up a tight end at some point? Because I mean, let's be honest, they're midway through their junior year. These guys are probably still in the realm where they're still going to grow.
Tamir Robinson is texting me right now. Sorry, I'm responding to him. All right, let's move to offensive
with that name
line.
You just dropped.
It's okay. Tamir and I are close. All right, offensive line. Let's go. Where do you want to start? Do we want to start tackle, interior? I mean, I guess we got to
better start tackle or people are going to riot.
All right, Gerby Lambert, man. Has to be Gerby Lambert as far as a bona fide tackle. Now, I know you're going to say Liam Andrews, and Liam Andrews is going to be a tackle, I think. But Gerby Lambert's really good, man. I really like him a lot. I picked Liam Andrews in the write-up as far as one offensive lineman, not interior, not offensive tackle. Just if you're picking one guy, I picked Liam Andrews. But I really like Lambert a lot, and of course, we can't overlook Kevin Haywood.
Yeah, those are the 3 that just kind of circle that top of the board. I'll go with Liam Andrews. I mean, I know we saw him in camp and thought, man, this kid's gonna be a really good guard, but he's pushing 6'5". I mean, he's bigger than we think. I think he's bigger than we remembered him, just for in terms of verifiable measurements and things like that. And when we were doing something like this in early December, you and I were going back and forth, and I said, okay, let's check in with some people. And Liam Andrews is your top interior guy, right? No, he's a tackle for Penn State.
Yeah.
So that's really what we were coming away with. That he's a really good player. Gerby Lambert, of course. I think Notre Dame's going to be involved. I think some of the big schools are going to be involved there. And then Kevin Haywood, I think you nailed it. It's another guy that's been on the board for a long time. And, Penn State will continue to push there. And I think Penn State's still in a good spot there. It's just he wants to get out and see some more schools in January for the junior days and things like that. The Armstrong twins, of course, are, I don't know if we label them as a package deal, but it seems like they're going to end up playing at the same school. Deontay and Devontae, both big guys that could play tackle at this level. And then I think there's a number of other guys out there in the region. Nair Daniels is absolutely, he's probably the most massive guy in this class. 6'7" plus, 350 plus. Probably gonna have
Those
to
are legit numbers.
Yeah,
6'7", 350
We're
is
gonna have to
legit.
see if he can maybe shape that up a little bit, but still, that's very big. Cameron Warren, who was, I believe, at St. Francis, and now back in Virginia at home. So there's a lot of names out there. It seems like the same thing every cycle. A lot of names out there. They'll kind of filter out through the spring as they continue to get on campus. I think with offensive line, maybe more than any other position, junior days end up being a good end up being pretty indicative of where they're actually looking and where they can actually end up. And we saw that last year. Donka, Javen Williams, and Birchmeier was on campus a bunch. Birchmeier was already committed at this point, but there was a lot to like there about that pattern. And then Cooper Cousins, of course, committed at a junior day, even though that was, a sophomore day essentially for him.
Yeah. One other guy, Jake Guarnar came up for camp. Let's keep an eye on him. He's a true interior guy. And then Penn State's not going to stop on Peter Jones. Do I see Peter Jones probably end up at Notre Dame at this point? Yeah, I do. But they'll keep pushing there.
I'm not convinced that they feel the same way about Peter Jones that they feel about some of these other guys. So okay. I see what you're saying there. And obviously at Malvern Prep kind of changes some things because you want to keep your in-state kids in state. But I don't know that they have Peter Jones as high on the board as
I think
outward appearances would make it. Yeah.
Well, Sean won, Ryan nothing. All right, defense. Let's move on. What are we? 22 minutes in here. All right, let's see if we can get this done within a half hour. Edge rusher, Jacob Smith, Dylan Stewart. Those were my picks on the wish list. I left out Dominic Nichols and Jalen Harvey. I just think those guys are a little higher on the board. But Nichols and Harvey are without a doubt top guys for Penn State. I mean, there's a lot of good defensive ends. Is Darian Mayo a DN down the road? I think he's more of an interior guy, probably. He's listed as
I think he's a DN. I think he's a big DN.
Sean too, Ryan nothing. Go on.
Well, no, I'm just saying I think. This is nobody's hopefully nobody plays this back in 4 years when he's a 295-pound defensive tackle, but I think he's a guy in the end. But you're looking at those edge guys and they're such at a premium. Jacob Smith's really good. So we'll see where he stands. Those guys are from Kentucky, but they board in New England. So I expect them on campus after the break. Jalen Harvey, a guy I'm a big fan of. He's got some snap coming off the edge. And we have, or at least I have a pick in for him. I don't know if you have a pick in for him for Penn State. Dominic Nichols is kind of the opposite of that. He's another big defensive end. I don't think he's got the twitch off the end that Jalen Harvey does, but another guy that has Penn State very high on his list. And then Dylan Stewart, as you said, that's going to be tough. I think it's going to be a guy that looks down south first and foremost, but we'll see what they go. I think it's a good pool to pick from. I think it's certainly more. I think there's certainly more available in the region in DN this cycle than there was last cycle.
For sure. Brian Robinson too. I would lead Michigan with Brian Robinson, but he's been here 3 or 4 times now. So don't want to leave him out. He's another guy that 6'4", 225 to see how he goes down the road. He played quarterback at one point though, so he'll probably be an edge guy. Okay. Ernest Willer, defensive tackle. Is Ernest Willer a defensive tackle, 6'3", 253? Do you think he definitely continues to grow that way?
I think he is. He's a bigger, like broader guy. So I think he probably is. Probably doesn't have the room of a Darian Mayo, who we just mentioned from Good Counsel, and he's got the thick neck. He's got a lot of things that you look for in a defensive tackle. I think he played on the interior at IMG and was productive. Like this isn't a guy that just went down there to be part of the team. He was productive. From for those of you not familiar, Willer is from Baltimore. Went to St. Paul's School before transferring down to IMG. Came up for a game this year and has a long-standing relationship with Penn State.
Yeah. A couple others, Heaven Brown Schuler, they do keep pushing for. We'll see if he gets on campus at some point, guy from Atlanta. I mean, Penn State makes a lot of stops in Atlanta, and he's one of the guys that they are consistently seeing over at Pace Academy. Nigel Smith was the other guy that I mentioned in my wish list. He came up for, was it the last game or was it the second last game? Maybe it was Maryland. I think it was Maryland he came up for. He's been to Ohio State, Texas A&M. He's been to all types of elite programs. Do I think Penn State's going to get Nigel? No. I think it's going to probably be hard there. They're playing from behind a little bit as far as, he's been on the recruiting show for like a year and a half now. So they're just now getting in the mix there. Let's see how John Scott continues to develop that relationship more. But, I mean, he is a guy who's saying he's going to get back at some point. And, he's a top, what, is he 50th, I think, in the All-3 consensus? Something like that. So
yeah, he's pretty high. Number 50 overall, yeah.
Yeah. So
there you go. Point
Cunningham's
for Ryan. Good job.
Yeah. Hey, T.A. Cunningham's a guy out in California that I just have people mention to me a lot that they like. But again, this is a problem that I think we've seen with Penn State. Like, out of these true top 200 or so defensive tackles, who are they leading with right now? Who's that guy that I have circled? I don't really have any. Maybe Ernest, but I don't. Do I think Ernest is truly leaning towards Penn State at the moment? I don't, but the issue is more so I don't know where Willer's leaning at the moment, if I'm being honest.
No, that's fair. And you've got some more of those big guys in there. D.D. Holmes, is he a D end? Is he a D tackle? It's 6'6", 240. He can play, definitely. But just wondering where he ends ends up in the end. Jordan Thomas at Don Bosco, another big guy that can move. Be very interesting because, as we said with offensive tackle, these defensive tackles are tough to find. If you go down the offer list, you will see a bunch of guys that are right around 6 foot, and that's not really the mold that they're looking for. And so those guys blow up early. And to be honest with you, those are like the running backs that I talked about earlier. If they're very productive at a younger age at that position, there's a reason for that. They probably close to done growing. They've grown into their body. They've got their coordination down, and then they probably have limited space to grow outside of that. So, or in the future. So we'll see where that goes from there. David Poly, speaking of IMG transfers, that'll be an interesting one to watch. He's from Hempfield High School. So we'll see how that works. And then Jaden Jackson, speaking of IMG, this is a guy that I can definitely see in Penn State's class. We don't talk about him all that often. He's a guy that, came in, he's originally from in the Indianapolis area, came in for camp, came up for a game, has tremendous things to say about Penn State. He's got a great relationship with Penn State. I'm curious to see who's all pushing here, but I'll be honest with you, in terms of identifying players at IMG a year out that could possibly end up in the class, it doesn't happen often, but I could definitely see that being a guy like Jaden Jackson. Yeah,
Jaden's actually a guy I should reach out to. I haven't talked to him too much since the summer.
Yeah, you should
I talked
to
him after that camp, but he's actually a guy I should probably hit up. Okay. Linebackers, guys. Anthony Specca, Aaron Childs. Those are the two I feel like I've been talking about nonstop for the longest time. But this is a pretty deep board. You got Chris Jones in there. You got Sam Pilaf. That's Sean's guy, I feel like, ever since camp. I mean, I know Sean really liked him. And so did I. Don't get me wrong. He was great at that camp that night. But hey, DeJuan Lane, he came up for that visit late in the year. A guy who's been quiet, but the more I learn about him, the more I talk to people about him, he's another guy I could see realistically ending up in this class. Don't want to leave out Cam Lindsey, of course, at Aliquippa. Kari Jackson, too, even. Wasn't Kari at IMG, and now he's back at West Bloomfield? I think right. That was the case. Yeah, but my point there is there's a lot of options at linebacker. I still feel like Aaron Childs would probably be the top guy. What's your thoughts there? Is it Becca? I don't know. I'm
still waiting to see if Childs is going to be a D end. Like you could say that about every position on defense is like the position that you're at in December of your junior year. You might be one position up on that assembly line, come next year. So we'll see with that. And I will say that with linebackers as well, that you can look at the safety board and find out who might grow into it, because as James Franklin said on signing day, they're not looking to sign Mikes. They're looking to sign athletic guys that can play on the outside, that can eventually grow into Mike if you need them to. So we'll see what happens with guys like that. But I will say a bunch of the guys that you mentioned, Pilaf 6'3", 205. I mean, the lighter guys that can move and can do things out on the edge. Gabriel Williams, Chris Jones, those guys. I mentioned Mekhi White with receiver. He's a guy that we've looked at as a potential linebacker for a long, long time. I don't think he sees that. And to be honest with you, most guys that are earmarked as potential wide receivers or linebackers, they'll lean receiver every time, but linebacker is probably the right call. We'll see where that goes. But I agree with Specca. Is a guy that Penn State's liked for a while. He's a little bit bigger than you think just by looking at him. I know some other schools are interested there. But I think that this group is going to continue to grow, and they're looking for guys that are built like Kevion Keys, built like Tony Rojas, that can run, that are 6'2" plus 6'3", got those long arms and things like that that they really like. So this is a board that's continuing to evolve.
Yep. All right, we've got it's a 30-minute mark. All right, speed fire through cornerback and safety. Actually, speed fire through this just because these are the two most confusing positions to me of all 2024 right now. I'd be lying if I thought I had a great feel for either position. I mean, I'll say corner. I picked Ellis Robinson for that. I just think it's the easy pick, giving his early relationships with the staff. And, they've continued to stay in touch. He's at IMG now. And then I picked Vabu Torre, I believe it is, out of South Jersey for safety. But, Sean, I mean, I'll throw it to you. I just don't have a great feel for really any of these guys at the moment.
No, the secondary is a big question mark, and not necessarily because the prospects that they're on aren't already ready to go. It's just a matter of they're going to find these guys a little bit later when these numbers check out. But at corner, Ellis Robinson is going to come out with a top 5 on January 1st. I think Penn State will be in it, but to me, it's Alabama and Georgia, and then 3 other schools. And I think Penn State will be one of those 3 other schools, but I think that's pretty much how you can view that one right now. Bryce West is in there from Ohio, Aaron Butler from out in California, Aaron Scott from Ohio. Just a couple of corners that kind of make sense in terms of the regional or guys that have been on campus and things like that, and they stack up athletically. That's where you find yourself looking at early offers and wondering, can these guys still make it at this level? And by this level, I mean the top of the Big Ten. I mean competing for college football playoff, that sort of school. And you just have questions about some of these guys just because the junior tape isn't that great, or they've run a high number at a camp or something like that. And I think that'll be very interesting to watch. And then with corner, you're going to see some of these corners eventually be safeties, because that's just kind of how it works. If they're not fast enough to play corner, slide them over to safety, see what happens. Jalen McLean is a guy like that in New Jersey. I think he's a really good player, but is he fast enough to turn and run and be a college corner? Jacob Oden, who came out with a top 5 today. Assad Brown is an interesting one, who came up and visited from Virginia. So I think that these guys will continue to develop, continue to see that. And then when Terry Smith or Anthony Poindexter or whomever gets out in the spring to see these guys, we'll actually want some times and things like that. And we get to track season and things like that. I think that's when it'll become a little bit more clear.
Yeah, track season. A lot of these guys are going to run track. I feel like this board will be figured out by the end of April. Come for those March visits, April visits, see who runs. And, actually, I mean, if we're being honest, it'll probably drag into the summer a little bit. But this board, these 2 positions are just tough to figure out right now. I do still think there's a lot of interest in Kenny Woosley, and we haven't talked about him a ton, but he's a guy that when I consistently ask about, he's certainly higher on their board than I think maybe his rating gives people the impression on. So
you never know with the Philly corners. It's tough to say because they offer everyone at Imhotep. They offer everyone at Newman Goretti. And you kind of got to filter out who the actual prospects are for this level. I know there's a lot of good players that go a lot of different places, but you got to sort of filter that thing and see where it goes from there. And and then you've got to figure out Florida, and you've got to figure out Michigan, and think. There's so much to figure out in terms of how these guys stack
Florida.
up. What's that?
No one can figure out Florida.
We didn't cover Conrad Hussey now that you mentioned it, but yes, you're absolutely right. Nobody can figure out Florida. Now, I was just looking at the thing, and I see that Penn State is listed as the RPM favorite for John Mitchell in Jacksonville in Florida. So there's a lot of these guys that pop up, especially at a position like corner, because they're all over the place, and schools just don't want to miss out on guys.
All right. Well, I got to do an interview with Tamir Robinson, catching up with him on his injury and all types of fun things like that. You guys can look forward to that interview later in the week. Obviously, I did not ask you guys to like the pod and all that stuff. T. Frank, I probably never will figure that out. So we'll blame Sean for that one. Sean, anything else? You gotta fly out to California on Friday, I believe.
On Friday, yeah. You guys will be out there by the time Nate and I get out there. But yeah, on Friday, looking forward to it. It was 80 degrees on Sunday. Should be high 50s for the game, I think I saw. So we'll see how that one goes. Fingers crossed we get there.
it was looking like rain for most of the week, and now at least it looks not quite as rainy, but not very warm. It's gonna be warm here actually, from what I saw. But all right, let's wrap this up. For Ryan Snyder, Sean Fitz, appreciate you guys watching the Blue White Illustrated Recruiting Podcast. We'll be back in 2 weeks. We won't be back next Tuesday. We'll be flying home. We'll talk to you then.